What is up and what is going on? Welcome back to the iCoach Nutrition Radio podcast. Today we're going to go over fat loss and muscle gain, right? And look into what realistic progress looks like. So if we kind of dive into the topic of fat loss and muscle gain, everybody wants this like amazing before and after picture, right? And they want it yesterday, right? But the reality of it is it takes time, right? And you have to really set realistic expectations, from the very beginning, right? Because that could be the difference in you getting amazing results versus literally just giving up altogether, right? And so we're going to talk about how fast a person can lose body fat, what the upper limits of muscle gain are, and how to figure out, progress, right? Like realistic markers that we can actually set, so that the results are actually sustainable, right? And so we're going to go through kind of the numbers and how you can kind of essentially create your own coaching game plan. So imagine if I took two people, right? There was let's say, 30-ish year old female. She wants to lose, let's say 30 pounds. And this has been weight that's been gained, maybe over college. And then the second person would be, let's call it a 20-something-year-old male who wants to add 15 pounds of muscle. They're both motivated, right? But we need to know, what this timeline should look like, right? Think to yourself, is this a 3-month journey, a 6-month journey, a 1-year journey, right? Like, what's the answer to that? And ultimately, the answer is it depends, right? Each option may be doable, right? But every single one of them kind of comes with trade-offs, right? And you have to make sure you understand what these trade-offs are and be able to then set realistic expectations. Because if not, you're going to end up disappointed, right? And so, there's a lot of people that typically are, that get frustrated from the lack of the results when they try to lose body fat or gain muscle. And a lot of that is, again, linked back to unrealistic expectations. Maybe they couldn't, maybe they were getting really fast results, but then it wasn't sustainable, right? Maybe it slowed down, or maybe all of the above, right? But again, what we're going to go over is what are kind of like realistic rates of body fat loss and muscle gain. And this will be all based off a combination of clinical evidence, with over 100,000 people in this database. And so we'll kind of show you the rate of progress that's right, for you specifically, and how you can actually, meet those expectations so that you can be consistent and get the results you want to get. Let's see. So if you look into kind of this example here, right, and building off of it. So if you look into, let's say this female individual lost 6 pounds of body fat in your first 4 weeks of working together. And let's say she was disappointed in her progress, right? Like from a coach's standpoint, that progress was fantastic, right? Let's say over 6 months, maintaining that rate of progress would lead to a 40-pound fat loss, right? That could be life-changing for someone. For other people, maybe that's way too much, right? They would never want to lose that much, right? So the female example, she would not want to lose that much. But again, we set these unrealistic expectations and then we feel like we failed, right? Because let's say 6 pounds in this example in 4 weeks doesn't feel like a lot, right? But the truth is we all have been lied to, right? These rapid results that people talk about, losing a pound a day or whatever, like that's crazy. it's just not sustainable. And although it can be done, almost every single time the weight is gained back, and sometimes even plus more. So the reality of it is that you have to understand the true goal, right? And what success looks like. And so, when you start asking these questions, you have to start thinking to yourself, you have to know, do I have, how much weight do I, do I have to lose in order to get to a healthy body fat percentage, right? For females, that would be under 30%. For males, that would be under 20%. What are the goals, right? Do you want to look fit in clothes? Do you want to pack on 15 pounds of muscle? Do you want to be shredded with visible abs, right? Like what are the goals that people are trying to accomplish? And then you just have to make sure that you're on the same page, right? And that you have kind of that shared understanding and what you are envisioning. You want to make sure you're in kind of complete agreement, right? And so we have to ask as many questions as possible. I mean, literally mindset, right? This almost, I say mindset in quotes now because it's like become this super popular word, but I guess it's the easiest way to kind of summarize, like the psychological aspect of behavior change, right? You think about the fact that you're combating all of these years, a lifetime of learned habits and beliefs and traits and skill sets. And so this is all about lifestyle change for most people, right? At least the people that we work with. And so yeah, I mean, you have to be able to kind of give yourself grace in that this isn't just going to happen overnight, right? Like fast results are not what you should be searching for. And I know, again, it's like you're very motivated, or sometimes we're very desperate to make something happen. But I mean, the most successful clients are definitely those that adopt the mindset of like falling in love with the process and the journey long term, right? And really thinking about this as a lifestyle change. So, again, some examples of this, right? Like, let's say somebody wants to lose, 20 pounds, right? What do they picture, right? Many people underestimate how much fat they have to lose to achieve a certain body composition. They might think they need to drop 20 pounds when in fact it's more like 40, right? Or let's say somebody says, I want to get healthier, right? So how do they know when they arrive, right? Are they picturing better blood work, right? And if so, what specific measures are they concerned about, right? Let's say the goal is they want to gain muscle, right? Are they okay with gaining some fat as well? Do they see themselves, as this a bodybuilder, right? Or somebody that wants to get toned, or look fit, or whatever the description is. Do they want to look muscular, right? Getting leaner might help them achieve that goal faster, right? And so, one of the sayings is like losing fat is the fastest way to look bigger, right? Or some people, let's say they actually want to get like a six pack, right? Are you actually prepared for what that entails, right? Achieving this type of physique often requires way more exercise, way more restrictive diet, way less flexible lifestyle. And so, you just have to make sure, again, you're ready to change into whatever you have to do to become that person, right? So just kind of going through your desired scenario there, that can help you with kind of building out your game plan and strategy moving forward. So, ultimately just knowing what you're getting into, right? So one thing you could do is you could put kind of this desired outcome on a like continuum, right? next to, let's say, 2 or more other outcomes, right? And if you want to highlight how to unlikely or how unlikely or difficult a goal will be, right? Show what it'll take to achieve to ease your goals, right? And so you can say, here are the trade-offs that you'll need to make to reach your goal, right? And for comparison, here's what 2 other outcomes might require, right? Do those trade-offs feel acceptable to you, right? And so on the other hand, if you want to give yourself more confidence, right, you might kind of sandwich your goal, right, between one that's easier and one that's harder, right? You could say there's no doubt your goal will be, it's going to be challenging, right? But at least you can, eat dessert most days and still achieve it, right? Like, what do you think about that, right? And so if you think about kind of an example, right, typically the trade-offs typically require to achieve like 3 different levels of body fat, right? And so you can look at, different body fat percentages, and like obviously get your own body fat percentage done or testing done first, see where you're at, get a baseline, and then from there you can set your goal as to, where you would actually want to be. Again, for most of my clients, it's just trying to get them to a healthy body fat percentage, right? And so for women, again, that would be, getting them to under 30% body fat, and for men, getting them under 20% body fat. That's what's considered, quote unquote, healthy body fat percentages. And so if you think about realistic rates of fat loss, right? How fast can you lose body fat? Like, it depends, right, on how consistently, right, you can, adhere to, whatever the protocol is. But if you think about kind of realistic rates of fat loss per week, if you broke it down into like extreme progress, reasonable progress, comfortable progress. So extreme, it would be like 1 to 1.5% body fat. So this would be about like 2 to 3 pounds in men, and then like 1.65 to 2.5 pounds in women. Reasonable progress would be like 0.5 to 1% body fat, which would be like 1 to 2 pounds for men, 0.8 to 6.5 pounds for women. And then like a comfortable progress would be like less than 0.5% body fat, or body weight. Men less than 1 pound, or right around a pound, and then women like 0.8 pounds. So those are like realistic rates of fat loss per week. And so essentially how do you quantify each one of these categories, right? Extreme would requires about 90 to 100% consistency. Reasonable requires about 70 to 85% consistency, and then comfortable requires about 50 to 65% consistency, right? And you can create a comfortable rate of progress, right, in which you are highly consistent. But your initial action plan, right, it requires you to make fewer changes than would be necessary to achieve reasonable or extreme rates of progress, right? So essentially, the more consistent you are, right, the faster your progress and the more fat you'll lose, right? And when you think about the number on the scale, you definitely need to remind yourself that it is not a linear process, right? You're not going to just see this straight line, your weight just going down every single day. That's not how it works, right? You need to pay attention to what your weekly and monthly averages and trends are, right? Because the reality of it is your daily weigh-ins, right, are going to go up, down, up, down, up, down, up, down, up, down, right? That doesn't matter, right? Don't let it stress you out or think that things aren't working or whatever. Trust the process, right? Because ultimately it's going to be a process where, your weight on the scale is going to go up and down probably every day. But you need to pay attention to what your weekly averages are, right? Because you're not going to care if your weight went up and down, let's say, 90 times over the course of 90 days, right? But at the end of that 90 days, you were down 12 pounds, right? So it's all perspective, but you just need to know that going into it. So it's definitely a process, right? In that as you're going through this journey, right, of trying to lose body fat, your metabolism is going to adapt, right? And so lowering your calorie needs even more than what you'd expect from the weight loss alone, right? And you'll also become more efficient at exercising, reducing the number of calories you burn through movement. So, just think about that, right? And then also think to yourself in that exercise less frequently, right? And intensely, because you now have less energy coming in. And this is why understanding training periodization in relation to nutritional periodization is really important, because you have to make sure that your nutrition and your training are in line in order to get the best results possible. For example, like if I was doing a calorie deficit in a dieting phase, I should not also be trying to do something that requires my best performance, right? Like you're not going to be as strong, you're not going to have as much endurance, your recovery is not going to be as good, right? Because doing a dieting phase, or trying to lose body fat, eating in a calorie deficit, that is very stressful on the body. So you just need to understand that, right? So that you can just know what you're getting into again, right? But I guess the best way to describe it would be to essentially think about it like a long road trip, right? And so if going in, right, that you're going to have to stop for food and bathroom breaks, and that you're going to probably experience some traffic jams and construction detours, things are going to happen, right? Because they will, right? And it's life. It's not always going to be, rainbows and butterflies. It's not always going to be smooth sailing, right? And so we need to learn how to coach ourselves to expect disruptions ahead, and making sure that the mental preparation, right, this is something that you build. It's like a muscle, right? And it'll be valuable down the road. So that was realistic rates of body fat loss. If we flip it now and we look into realistic rates of muscle gain, the main factors that are contributing here is your age, right, your biological sex, right, your genetics, consistency, obviously, and that would be both on the training and nutrition side, as well as like specifically on the training side, your intensity, your frequency, your style, your volume, and there's other factors as well. But if we're looking at different fitness levels in terms of realistic rates of muscle gain per month, we'll break it down into beginner fitness level, intermediate fitness level, and advanced fitness level. So for men, 1 to 1.5% body weight, this would be anywhere from like 1.5 to 2.5 pounds. And this is realistic rates of muscle gain per month. Okay. And for women, 0.5 to 7.5% body weight, which would be like 0.65 to 1 pounds per month. For intermediate, we look at 0.5 to 0.75% body weight, or 0.75 to 1.25 pounds per month. And then that's for the men. For the women, that would be 0.25 to 0.375% body weight, or 0.325 to 0.5 pounds per month. And for advanced, now we're looking at the lowest, right? So 0.25 to 0.375% body weight, or 0.375 to 0.625 pounds per month for men. And then for women, 0.25 to 0.875% body weight, which would be, again, in pounds there, right? So for women. So as you can see, right, this is kind of the what we call newbie gains, if you will, right? If you haven't strength trained ever in your life, or if you haven't strength trained in a very long time, or maybe you haven't strength trained consistently, or maybe you're just not doing it correctly, right? There's so many things that could prevent you from actually hitting these numbers, obviously. And this is why, again, like you've got to know how to coach yourself. That's the most important part. This is a skill set, right, that you need to develop, because it's one of the most important skill sets for your overall health, is to learn how to coach yourself to live a consistent, healthy lifestyle the majority of the time, right? So again, right, much like fat loss, muscle gain is often not linear either. Progress seems to come in kind of just, bits, right? Especially after the first year of dedicated training. However, it's not uncommon to see kind of these newbie gains, where people gain 15 to 25 pounds of muscle in their first year of dedicated training, right? As a beginner, right? And then anywhere from another 10 to 15 pounds in their second year being an intermediate. We've seen young women gain 8 to 12 pounds of muscle in their first year as a beginner, along with 4 to 6 in their second as intermediate. And then, typically after the first 3 or so years of dedicated training, when you kind of become more advanced, it often takes years of persistent effort to see incremental gains. So over the course of a lifting career, for example, men have the potential to gain about 40 to 50 pounds of muscle, and women have the potential to gain about 20 to 25 pounds of muscle, right? And this all kind of depends on your height, your bone structure, your genetics, right? And without the help of performance enhancing drugs, obviously. So for realistic rates of muscle gain shown, right, the emphasis is on young men and women under the age of 30. Testosterone and other sex hormones are higher during this time of life. And also there is this thing called cellular turnover, as well as overall recovery capacity. And so all of the key factors here for muscle growth. Older men and women usually add less muscle and or at a slower rate due to changes in these variables, right? And so you can still gain significant muscle after your 20s, but for the most part, this depends on whether or not you still have a fair amount of room to reach your kind of 40 to 50 pound for men and 20 to 25 pound for women potential. And so if you kind of identify a likely rate of fat loss or muscle gain, right, for yourself, depending upon your goal, right, consider what the realistic rates of fat loss and muscle gain are, right? What's the upper limit of what can be achieved in a given time frame, right? And then adjust that number based on the person and conditions, for you specifically with your lifestyle, right? And so this is honestly where like the coaching aspect comes in and can really help. The accountability, the support, the education, the tools, just the ability to be coached and to follow the plan and not have to really put all the pieces together and think about everything, just more so just say, yes, sir, yes, ma'am, and just put in the work. But it, the essentially, if you want to really think about what are the rate of body composition changes, right, that can be affected, right? Like what are the factors that affect this? So what makes fat loss harder, being older, right? Being female, being smaller, being relatively lean, little to no activity, doing excessive cardio without other types of activity, being inconsistent, right? Sleeping less than 7 hours per night, excessive stress or perception of excessive stress, leptin resistance, low leptin insulin resistance, birth control, corticosteroids, antidepressants, menopause, hypothyroidism, PCOS, Cushing's syndrome, depression, right? Those are all factors there that could, right, make fat loss harder, right? And what makes fat loss easier then? Being younger, being male, being heavier, having more body fat, high levels of activity, having a well-rounded exercise regimen, being consistent, which would mean at least 80% of the time living that 80-20 lifestyle, sleeping at least 7 to 8 hours most nights, appropriate stress levels or perception of appropriate stress, hormones in healthy ranges. And then there's some medications as well, which I won't go into. And just obviously being overall healthy, not having any health issues there. And then from there, let's look at, so that was with fat loss. Let's now look into the factors that make muscle gain harder or easier, right? So what makes muscle gain harder would be being older, right? Over 40, being female, having a small frame / bone structure, having more body fat, little to no activity, inadequate resistance training / excessive cardio, being inconsistent, sleeping less than 7 hours most nights, excessive stress or perception of excessive stress, high cortisol, thyroid drugs, ADHD drugs, acne medication, IBD, gastroparesis, hyperthyroidism, depression. Those would all be factors there, right? And again, this isn't like an exhaustive list. These are just examples of what would make muscle gain harder or harder in that example. And then as we move into what could make muscle gain easier, being younger than 30, being male, having a large frame / bone structure, being relatively lean, moderate levels of activity, resistance training, being consistent, right? At least 80% of the time, sleeping at least 7 to 8 hours most nights, appropriate stress level or perception of appropriate stress level, hormones in healthy ranges, and then again, just healthy, right? So you also have to think about or account for, what else is happening in your life, right? And so, are you going to improve at a consistent rate, or are there going to be periods where progress slows, right? For example, let's say there's a client that's an accountant, right? And maybe they need to adjust expectations during tax season, right? Maybe, during the holidays, the goal might be to maintain current progress, then aim to make further progress after the holidays have passed, right? And what about, upcoming vacations or planned breaks, right? And so you're not going to be able to, foresee every single issue that is going to come up, but you can definitely plan for what you know. Right. And this goes back to just that proactive approach, right? Being in reactive mode when you're trying to accomplish a goal is just probably not going to work that great. Right. And so this is how, little improvement, that you're willing to accept, right? And making sure that you understand that and you understand kind of what the periodization is going to look like. And that way you can create kind of the timeline as to how you're going to build out the game plan and the strategy to get there, right? And so once you have kind of a good idea of where you want to go, right, and how fast you want to get there, then you need to make sure, again, you're just ready, right? You're willing, you're able to do what it takes, right? And then you also then are like, hey, this is where I'm going to find out how realistic the rates of progress truly are, right? Based on the action plan you create, right? And so this is how we got to make sure you're confident in, following the plan, trusting the process, right? And so if you're ready, if you're willing, if you're able, to follow through with these things consistently, then awesome, right? If you don't feel that confident, then you have to, adjust the game plan, right? And that might have to be adjusted multiple times there in the beginning. That's okay. It's just, again, trying to meet you where you are, right? And so you got to revisit and recalibrate expectations as data, right, accumulates. So nobody can perfectly predict your rate of progress, right? But this exercise is going to give you kind of a measure of, if things are moving in the right direction at the desired rate, or if the outcomes are falling short of expectations. So in general, right, you should monitor results for 2 weeks before recommending or before adjusting your food intake or action plan, right? And as as you kind of get more confident, more advanced in this process, or progress closer to your final goal, it may be, it may take 4 weeks to see, the intake is working or not, right? And so you just make sure you're giving yourself an appropriate amount of time before considering further adjustments. And so as you gather data, right, and you choose kind of the next actions based on that data, you have to continually review and revise your plan and expectations, right? And so if you're not losing fat, for example, within realistic parameters, right, then decrease your calorie intake by, let's say, 200 calories a day, right? This would be like cutting out, like, let's say 25 to 40 grams of carbs, and or 7 to 12 grams of fat, right? Or simply remove, 1 to 2 cupped handfuls of carbs and or 1 to 2 thumbs of fat from your daily intake if you're using the hand portion kind of method there, right? So that'd be like 2 to 3 total portions of carbs and fats combined, right? And if you're not gaining muscle, right, within realistic parameters, then again, increase your calories now. So don't decrease them, increase them by, let's say, 200 calories a day, right? This could be like adding, so instead of subtracting, this would be like adding 25 to 40 grams of carbs, right? 7 to 12 grams of fat, or, if you're doing the hand portions, 1 to 2 cupped hands of carbs, 1 to 2 thumbs of fat to your daily intake. All right, so that'd be like 2 to 3 total portions of carbs and fats combined, right? And so let's say you're losing too much lean mass when losing weight, right? Then increase your daily protein intake by about 25 grams or so. This would be, like 25 grams is going to be about, let's say, 4 ounces cooked, right? Or, like 1 palm-sized portion is typically about 3 to 4 ounces there. And if you're gaining too much fat when adding muscle, right, then again, increase your daily protein intake by about 25 grams and decrease your daily carb intake by about 25 to 50 grams, and or fat intake, kind of your choice on that. I'm sorry, so the carb intake 20 to 25 grams, the fat intake 7 to 15 grams. Or you could simply add 1 extra palm of protein to your daily intake and remove 1 to 2 cup handfuls of carbs and or 1 to 2 thumbs of fats from your daily intake. And then from there, let's say your workouts are too tough, you're not recovering from them well. You need to, kind of break this down into 4 steps. So step 1, you need to review your overall daily energy intake, right? If you're cutting calories to lose fat or lose weight, you have to maybe consider increasing by 100 to 200 calories, just so that you're eating a slight deficit. Step 2 would be review your total protein intake, right? Just adding 25 more grams, or again, a palm-sized portion of protein per day can make a difference. Step 3 would be to review your total carbohydrate intake, right? You may need more than you're getting, right? Especially like before and after training sessions or games or competitions, races. And so start with just, add 25 to 50 grams of carbs to your daily intake. That would be like 1 to 2 cupped handfuls of carbs. And then step 4 would be review your total daily fat intake. Make sure your intake of essential fatty acids is looked at, right? So if you're noticing a lot of inflammation, you might benefit from increasing your intake of eating more fat sources, right? And decreasing your intake of essentially increasing your healthy fats, right? Your omega-3s, and decreasing your unhealthy fats, your omega-6s. And so these are just some things that you want to think about here. And if you think about the statement, let the facts guide you, right? You may progress faster or slower than you expected, right? Or you may encounter unexpected challenges, right? Such as an injury or illness, right? But this is okay, right? base predictions, right, and expectations on known data, right? Not imagination, not your hopes and dreams, not assumptions, right? There was a psychotherapist that said the facts are friendly, right? So no matter what happens, consider this calibration an essential and valuable part of helping you become a more accurate and evidence-driven person, right? And this outcome-based decision making, right, is a powerful tool, right, for helping you see how your actions lead to progress and results, right? And numbers, stepping on the scale, is not the only way to measure your progress, right? So you have to think to yourself, like, the scale, even inches lost, body fat percentage, like, you know, the progress aspect. There's also all of this subjective measures as well, right? Showing up and making an effort, right, no matter how small, tiny actions that are just a little bit better than before, right? Feeling more at ease with food, daily wins like having breakfast on your busiest morning, having more energy and vitality, getting stronger and or fitter, you know, feeling more confident in one's body or sense of self. Just making sure you understand how far you've come, right? No matter what the numbers show, right? And making sure you're pointing out the bright spots, right? Celebrating your wins, especially in behaviors and your actions and your mindset, right? Positive feedback, giving yourself positive feedback, being your biggest cheerleader. You know, this is I always say you got to know when to give yourself grace, right? And you got to know when to push yourself. So you need both, right? But again, you just need to reflect on and think about how far you've come. And that will help with establishing confidence and motivation. And it'll also help you to overcome obstacles. But remember, it's about progress, right? Not perfection. And so whether you want to lose body fat or gain muscle or both, you know, make sure that creating a realistic expectation, you know, setting a realistic expectation is one of the key points to making sure that you're going to be successful. So appreciate y'all listening along as always. Hopefully this was helpful. And yeah, as always, let me know if you have any questions, and until next time, thanks guys.